God, maybe you first started to see God, and when you started to really become first, excited about Him. That first moment where you're just like, wow. You got really excited. Maybe you didn't know where it was coming from. Maybe you didn't know what was happening, but you got really excited. That first moment where you're just like, okay, this is awesome. For some of us, this all probably happened in different ages. Some of us might have grown up in the church, and that was at a younger age. Maybe it was at a youth rally where that was the first time that we saw, oh, this is really cool. This is where I'm first starting seeing God. This is what makes me really excited. So for some of us, this might not have happened until our 20s, our 30s, or our 40s. But we all have that one moment that we can say that we're just like, wow, this is great, this is awesome, makes me excited, this gives me a passion that starts burning, and it makes me excited, it makes me enthused. Like I said, tonight I'm really talking about being on fire for God. And this entire time I'm going to be using the analogy of a fire, just because, like I said, that's the topic. So the entire time I'm going to be referring to sticks and wood and fire the entire time, and I just ask that you go along with me. The idea of being on fire for God, it's this passion, it's this excitement, it's this enthusiasm that drives us, it compels us. And the reason I want to use the term enthusiasm is because the word enthusiasm comes from a 17th century French word, enthusiasme, which even comes from a Latin or Greek word, enthusiasmos or entheos, which means possessed by God or inspired. And I think that if we take this idea of being on fire for God and being enthusiastic, we should be enthusiastic, because if we're on fire for God, we can feel it. It's that passion. We're inspired by God. We are possessed by Him. And some of us, we've been on fire for God. We've been really excited. And the reason I had Kevin read Luke 24:20-32 is because in that passage, it talked about our hearts were burning. I want us to go back, think about that moment that I talked about, that I wanted you all to think about earlier. Think about that moment that you got really excited for. Because I feel like the beginning in verses 28 through 30, and then in 30 through 30, and then 31 through 32, that's where it's the beginning, right before that moment happens, and then we have the after moment. That's what happens. That's when we get really excited. So if you'd all like to turn to Luke 24 in your Bibles, I'm starting in verse 28. And my verses are taken out of the NIV Bible, and it says, as they approached the village they were going, and he acted as though he was going farther. In this passage, when they use the word he, they're referring to Jesus. It continues on to say, but they urged him, saying, stay with us, for it is getting towards evening, and the day is now nearly over. So he went in to stay with them. This is the moment before. This is the lead up. This is the moment that it's going to. This is the moment before everything happens. Like these people, they were walking with Jesus and they didn't know about it. This is right after the resurrection. But they were walking and they didn't know that they were right with him the entire time. And sometimes that's how it was with our moment, because we didn't know what was going on with us. We might have been walking with Jesus. He was probably there, but we didn't realize it yet. We didn't know what was going on. Continuing in 24, continuing through 30-32, it says, when he had reclined at the table with them, he took the bread and blessed it, and breaking it, he began giving it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to one another, were not our hearts burning within us while he was speaking to us on the road, while he was explaining the scriptures to us? You see, in an instant, it all came to them. They all realized, they're like, whoa! He was here. Jesus was here. Everyone had been talking about it, but he was here with us. For us, that was that moment when we realized that was the first spark for us. That was kind of what got us going. For them, they realized it in that instant. It probably started going for them. Things started moving for them. Their brains started turning. Their fire began to grow. It started. Because it all starts from somewhere. It starts somewhere small. And like I said, tonight I'm talking about a fire. The idea of a fire is that you can't just throw a log into a fire pit and watch it and go, it hasn't started going on fire yet. You gotta start with a spark. You gotta start with something small to get things going. That first moment where we realize that we have Jesus, and that first moment where we start being on fire, it takes a small spark. It takes something small to get things going. Because once that spark catches, we can start putting other things on top of it. We can start building that fire even more. If we take the idea that the events that go on in our lives that help grow us in our spirituality, that help us grow closer with God, we take these ideas and I'm going to say that they're like sticks. After we have our fire started going and we have that spark going, we start adding sticks. It grows bigger and bigger with every stick we put on it. And then we start moving it from sticks and we start putting logs on there. It's the idea that our fires keep growing throughout time. They keep growing. They keep getting bigger the more and more we put on there. Throughout our lives, they seem to get bigger. We start moving it from sticks, we start throwing logs on there, and they keep getting bigger. Soon we had a small fire from the spark we had, but now we have a really big fire. But there's a downside. We grow up and we keep moving on, but there's two ways. Well, a fire needs to keep going with wood. It needs to keep being tended to. If a fire is left alone, if it's not tended to, if we don't keep adding sticks to it, it burns down into the coals. Something small. And that's where we can be sometimes. That's what I really wanted to hit tonight. Like I said, I'm talking about a fire, and sometimes after that spark, we know we've gotten big, we grew our fire, but sometimes we leave it unattended. We walk away for a minute saying, oh, I'll be back. And we leave it unattended, and it can burn down to the coals sometimes. It's something small. Something that was once so big is now kind of small. And sometimes I think those coals can be us. We keep the fires going, but sometimes, like I said, we forget about them and we leave them. Once we get back, we realize that raging fire is now just a pile of smoldering logs. And the question I want to ask you guys tonight is, where's the fire? Where's the fire? Where's the fire within us? Like I said, the sermon, I don't want to step on anyone's toes. I don't want to feel like I'm talking to you guys saying that you guys aren't trying hard enough, that you're not trying as hard as you can, you're not keeping that fire going. That's not what I want to say. Because believe me, I've been at that point where I've grown up my fire so big, but then it kind of falls down a little bit. I leave it unattended for a while because I'm like, oh, fire, I'll be back, because I want to do what Trevor wants. And I leave the fire where it is. I can't even count how many times I've kind of let my fire die down. But I don't want that to happen to you guys. I always want our fire to keep getting bigger and better. And I don't want us to leave it unattended so it kind of falls down, that it kind of falls down into small coals from the big fire that it once was. And sometimes we may not leave our fire completely, that it burns down to coals, but at one point, if we're really high in our spiritual life and we keep going and we're putting logs on our fire, we're making it really big, we leave it for a little bit, maybe not too long, but we come back and it's like, oh, it's not as big. I'm going to put sticks on my fire to keep it going so it doesn't burn down, but it's not getting any bigger anymore. It's the idea that we keep making sure that it won't die, but that it stays where it is. One verse that I think can really push this idea, it's 1 Thessalonians 5:19. And in this passage, Paul is talking about spiritual gifts. He's really talking about spiritual gifts. But I really feel like this verse is also applicable to this lesson. If we have this idea now that we're just putting enough on our fires to make sure it keeps going, that it doesn't get bigger, that it doesn't get smaller. 1 Thessalonians 5:19 says, do not quench the spirit. But if we were to replace the word spirit with fire, it says don't quench your fires. Don't be putting enough in the fires just to keep things going. Because sometimes we just put enough in the fire for it to be content, for us to be content, saying, oh, we're not doing as much as we could be, but we're also not giving up. We're putting in with it just enough to keep it going. And like I said, I'm not trying to step on anyone's toes here, because for me, this is my entire past year at college. If I kept my Trevor fire over here, after I went to college, I kind of left it where it was. I wasn't feeding my fire at college. I mean, I didn't leave it completely because, I was throwing sticks in it to make sure it kept going, that it wouldn't burn out. But I wasn't trying. I wasn't going out to try to build my fire back up. Because at college, I let my friends make me go to church sometimes so I could get the word instead of me wanting out to go and do it. And sometimes I let the speakers bring me a message instead of me going out to find the message. And sometimes I let my teachers at college bring me a lesson from either Matthew or Acts, a new idea, but I wasn't going out finding it. But I was still going to church, and I was still going to class, and I was still listening to the speakers. But I wasn't keeping up my fire. I just kept throwing stuff into it sometimes. And that's how we can be sometimes. Sometimes we can just tell ourselves that it's good enough, that we're just going to throw enough in to keep it going. But the problem with that is, at one point, it comes to saying, hey, I'm not throwing sticks in my fires anymore. I'm going to throw twigs. Because, I like my fire, but, I forget it a little bit, so I'm going to throw some twigs in there. But I'm going to be right back. And then I come back, and, I'm not throwing twigs anymore. I'm starting to throw leaves, something even smaller. And then now I'm going to come back, and I'm going to throw grass in the fire. That's how we kind of get down to these ideas, these small coals. That this once big fire that we have, it's now something pretty small. It's a shadow of its former self. The fire isn't what it used to be. And I know all of you are hoping tonight that since Jeff wasn't speaking, we weren't going to hit Revelation. But I feel like this idea of fires is kind of hit a little bit of Revelation. I mean, this topic Jeff talked about 47 years ago when we started the class, but I think it's still prevalent here. If we flip to Revelation 3, we have that story in there of the church in Laodicea. And one of the key verses in there is 3:15 when he's talking about them being hot and them being cold. They're not being hot or cold, but they're in the middle. They're lukewarm. Revelation 3:15 says, I know your deeds, that you are neither hot nor cold. I wish you were one or the other. If we think about it like a fire, if we're being really hot, we got a really big fire. We're doing awesome. But if we're really cold, now we're the coals. We're just something kind of small. But if we're in the middle, we're just feeding our fire to keep it going enough. Like I said, I'm not trying to step on anyone's toes here. But sometimes we are the coals. Unfortunately, even I have to admit that I've been the coal sometimes. But here's the one thing I want you all to realize, and this is what I encourage everyone to know, is that we can be coals. It's okay to be a coal sometimes, but realize that coals can start another fire. Coals can get going again. If we think back to the beginning, if we think about that event that really caused us to feel something, that moment that sparked us, sometimes all we just need is another spark. We just need something else to get us going again. So we had a big fire once and it got a little small, but we can take what we have and we can start a new fire. We can start something else. Those coals can help us start a bigger, better fire than what we already have. Sometimes all we just need is that little bit of spark. And here's the analogy that I want to make to you guys for the idea of rekindling that fire, to restart that fire over again. Now, it's going to seem kind of weird because I'm talking about water, I'm talking about fire. Just stay with me. The idea that I want to make here is in order to rekindle our fire, we got to jump in the pool. I know all of you are thinking, fire, pool, what does that have to do with anything? Well, here's this idea. If I'm a coal and I go to the pool, I say, oh, look at the water. Well, I'm going to test it out first. I'm going to test it out. I'm going to go, oh, that's too cold. That's too cold. I can't do that. I can't get in. And then we start thinking to ourselves, well, I got in the water. My toe was in the water, so therefore I was in the water. Now, sometimes that's a coal mentality, saying that we're here, we may not be putting forth all the effort, but we're still there. But if we really want to be that fire again, if we really want to be blazing again, if we want to have that idea of being on fire for God, we got to jump in the pool. We have to surround ourselves in a situation to where we can get that spark again. Instead of dipping our foot in the fire, or dipping our foot in the water as a coal, we got to jump in the water to surround ourselves in order to be that big fire. Like I said, to get that fire back, we have to put ourselves in a situation to do that. We have to surround ourselves in a situation. Because how can we get our spark back again if we don't put ourselves in a position to get our spark back? You know, even if this means we have to come to a Sunday morning class, we have to come to Wednesday night class, we have to come to Sunday morning service, we have to come sit in on a Sunday night service. Sometimes we're just sitting here and we're not feeling it. We're not really on fire. We're those small coals again. But we're here. We're sitting here to attempt to make our fires back again. And I've been there too, guys. I've sat in church sometimes and I haven't absorbed much and I've been that coal. But putting yourself in that position to say, I want to be a fire again and I want to be on fire, it's better that I come down to sit in church and try to absorb something than just not come at all. Because we're here, we're trying. And trying is sometimes that's the beginning point. Trying is sometimes where we got to start. We may not be all in yet. You know, maybe we're going to dunk half our foot in there to get there, to jump in the water. But sometimes we just have to sit down and try to at least absorb something. I just want all of you guys to take this idea of being on fire and jumping back in sometimes. You know, I'm sure all of us are at different points. All of you are out there at different points right now. Some of you are on fire. Some of you may have a medium, small fire, and some of us might be coals. But sometimes we just got to jump back in and put ourselves in that situation to be on fire. And here's why I personally think that's a great way to get the fire back going again. Like I said, for the entire past year at college, when I sat there and I wasn't feeding myself, and I was slowly dwindling down from that medium fire to those coals, I had to put myself in a position where I had to surround myself in order to find that spark again. A few weeks ago, I went out to NYC intermediate session at camp, and I wasn't super on fire at that point. I mean, I was really excited to go to camp and see the people again, but I was slowly starting to build up my coal fire into a burning fire. I went out there to put myself in a position where I was with other staff members who were on fire for God, or trying to make their fire even bigger, to try to find someone out there who is really on fire for God and really pushing for it, and put myself in a position where those people are really excited. I also had to surround myself with campers who are really young, and even at their age, they're trying to figure God out. They're trying to get a relationship with Him. They're trying to start their fires. They're trying to make their fires bigger. They're developing their fires. And I had to put myself in that position with them in order to rekindle my own fire. I had to surround myself with them to get reignited. And this process of surrounding yourselves, it isn't a one-and-done thing. You can't just show up and it's automatically going to cure it. For me, it took me a week and a half out of the 2 weeks I was there to have that fire rekindled. 3 days before the session ended, one of my friends comes up to me and she says, "Hey, I got to talk to you." And I was like, "What?" She's like, "We got 2 campers and they want to get baptized." And I was like, "What?" And they're like, "Yeah, I've been talking to them and they really want to get baptized." And so for the next 3 days, at any moments we can, I sat down with these 2 girls individually together and we talked about baptism. And they were so excited. They had so much love, and their fires were probably burning hotter than I've ever seen teenagers' fires burn hotter before. They were so excited. And when I got to baptize them, it spread to me. It got my fire going, and I was so excited. It took a spark like that to get me going again. Now I want all of you guys to take that and just think about where yourselves. Do a fire check tonight. See where you are. You know, even if your fire is really small tonight, try to find a spark to get back in there. Try to get that spark going again, because all it takes is a little spark to get a big fire going. Number 716.